Hello. Tyler Vanderhoeven here. I'm going to give you a little demo of StellarAuth and how you might implement it into your own applications, what it's going to look like for you and your users. So at the end of the day, StellarAuth is a developer application and a user app, very similar to two-factor authentication, at least as far as how it's going to work for you and your users. It can do a whole lot more than two-factor authentication, but there is a QR code that gets passed back and forth, and users will be using an application to verify, sign, reject transactions. So it's helpful to think about it in those terms, but only insofar as the flow is similar. It can do a whole lot more. It's not even at all codes being passed back and forth. It's transactions that you send to your users, which are Stellar transactions, so they can include all kinds of different operations, any operation on the Stellar protocol. You can also just sign messages and use those verifications to perform actions in your own applications. If that all seems as clear as mud, we can walk through a little bit and show you how this might work, get those wheels turning. So it all begins with, inside your application, handing your users a key and assigning that key to their user object inside your own application. So you are going to kind of create this little object of metadata for your key that you're sending to your user so they can see who you are, logo, title, etc. And that's going to create a token and a key, which really this token is just a key store file that's encrypting the secret key here. So this is what you're going to save in your database for this user, and this token is what you're going to share with your users. Now, obviously, that's a bit cryptic, so we will generate a QR code from that, which we can then show to our users to scan. So you'll show this alongside with some information like we are using StellarAuth for login, or we use StellarAuth as part of the security flow in our application. To kind of put visuals to that, we could just real quick show what this might look like if StellarX were using this. So where they've got their multi-factor authentication settings here, they might show something like StellarAuth with a QR code, and then maybe even links down here to download the application if it's a first-time user. Lots of different ways you could introduce this into your application, both as login, two-factor authentication, or just part of your flow of your application after a user's been created. It's really up to you, because this is secure user verifications for any action that you want them to perform, that you have to be sure that it's actually them. So passwordless login, it's more secure than that because it's not email or SMS. It's a local device where those secrets are stored only with them. So it could be passwordless login. You could also do multi-factor authentication if you've got a username and password already and you just want to add an extra layer of security, or really you want to very easily assign a Stellar address to them for asset management in the future, or other protected actions without them having to enter their password over and over and over again. You can just send these transactions to their StellarAuth application, and they can accept or decline those as they wish. So in this case, we might scan this on our device, or if we're on desktop, we could just drag and drop to our desktop. We could also save the image to our desktop, so we will just go ahead and do that. We'll close this for now with the idea that if we were to accept that, now StellarX could send us all kinds of stuff as far as transactions, which we will go through here in a second. So I've got my key now on my desktop, so let's open up the StellarAuth app. So you've shown them how to download it, given them a link, they've downloaded their application. Now they're ready to either sign in with an account they have, maybe they already have the application, or they're a brand new user and they'll sign up. So we'll put in a extremely secure 3-character passcode. This will be what guards all of their secrets, very similar to what 1Password or LastPass does. They will then have a account QR code, which they can use to share across devices if they have other platforms that they want to add StellarAuth to and keep all their keys in sync. We're not going to do that quite yet. So we'll just hit next and then add that key that we got from StellarX. We'll paste that in. You could also import it, same thing. Add it, yes please. And it will add this StellarX key to our user's StellarAuth app. From here, we need to verify the key. So this is essentially passing ownership from your app to their local app. So the key right now is encrypted. The secret key, the ability to actually do any signing, is encrypted inside that key store file, and you need to pass that encryption from your app to their app. The way you do that is simply by taking this key here, and this could be a job that runs. You could just watch this key and see when it's been changed. Keep hitting this endpoint. Eventually we might add webhooks, but you'll just verify that transaction or verify that key, which then will pass ownership over to their side. So we refresh that. We can see that they are now a verified account. So the encryption has been passed over from your app to their app. You no longer have access to the secret key. In fact, you never really did have access to the secret key because it's protected. The encryption or the secret key of the key that you just passed them, their Stellar account, that secret key has been guarded, encrypted. That key store file is encrypted with something from you and something from me. So neither one of us have access to it. You need both my app and your app to pass that ownership over to their side. And once it's on their side, they're the only one who knows anything about it. The key store is guarded by, encrypted by their passphrase. So now it's time to send transactions. So for that, we'll go to our handy dandy Stellar laboratory. We will make sure we have their key. We can start to send them transactions. Now you'll notice we have not created their account on the Stellar Ledger yet. If we go to the Endpoint Explorer and we look up their account, it'll come up with nothing because we haven't actually funded it yet. But that is not a problem. We don't have to actually send transactions to the ledger to make use of all of the Stellar tech stacks, signing and key verifications and signatures and stuff. It doesn't have to actually make it to the ledger. We can make use of all that tech without actually passing things back and forth. So this can, if you don't necessarily even immediately or ever need to use the Stellar asset management stuff, you just want to make sure that a user is who they say they are. You never have to spend any XLM, any money to fund accounts. You can make use of all the technology without spending a dime, which is incredible. So this is StellarX. We'll do a memo of login request. We'll set a time bound. This time bound is only going to work if it's on the Stellar ledger. Otherwise, you'll have to interpret when that transaction has been signed if the time bound is up yet. But it's very easy to parse the XDR, the signed XDR that's coming back, look at the time bound and say, is this request still valid? You don't have to include a time bound at all either. It's really up to you. But if you want to make use of some of the information that's inside the XDR, you'll have to parse that on your side once you check the transaction, once it's been signed. We'll look at that in a second. To be able to grab in the UI here in the laboratory, we have to assign it some sort of operation. When you're doing this in your code, you don't have to assign an operation. You can just send a raw envelope without any operations. But for now, we'll just do a throwaway one of inflation. And we'll grab that XDR. And we will send that transaction to the key. And the key is encrypted inside of this XDR, or encoded, I guess, inside this XDR. So you don't have to include any extra information. We'll send that request to the account, and if we were to go back to StellarAuth, we'll see that login request has synced to the device. So now we can accept or reject the request. So StellarX is asking us if we've asked StellarX essentially if we want to log in. They've sent to make sure that we're who we say we are. Yes, we are. So that request will go back. It'll get signed on the device and then sent to the server, which we can then look up if we grab the key, we say, hey, show me all of the transactions for this account, for this key. And we see that it's signed. And now that it's signed, we know that the user has verified the transaction. It is signed, it is valid. We could look at the XDR if we needed to see if like a secondary check to see if the time bounds are passed. But essentially this transaction is valid. You can now use this packet to perform some action. In this case, it was a login request. So you could defer that, okay, this is a login request, they've signed it, we can log this user in. So that's pretty incredible. Now, what if we wanted to do an asset movement and actually send it to the ledger? Well, all we'd have to do is grab our key and at some point during the flow, fund that key. So in testnet, we'll just take it to the friend bot and fund it. We'll get an actual sequence number for it. Make sure we put in a base fee this time. And we'll say live login request. And I think inflation might fail because it's too soon. So we'll just do a bump sequence, which is kind of also another throwaway, can be a throwaway transaction. We'll sign that and send it to the user. And assuming all has gone well, come back over here. And if we are to sign this now, we'll notice it'll go from signed to sent, signed, submitted, because it's actually made it to the Stellar ledger all the way. So the transaction, we already checked that the transaction is valid, but then we also can submit it because the account exists. It has funds, it can send and move things around. If we went and checked the transaction hash on, where is it? Transaction, single transaction, and we were to take a look at this, we'll notice that the transaction actually exists on the ledger like we would expect. So there's kind of two levels there, right? Where you've got the first level where things can be signed, which is valid, but it's not on the ledger, and then submitted, so the action is actually made it there. So that would be useful for actually performing actions on the Stellar network. So StellarX would need this, right? To move assets around and make trust lines and trades, etc. But it's not, you don't have to do that necessarily. So that's all very cool. You can obviously reject those transactions and nothing really magical happens other than the status would be rejected rather than sent, signed, or submitted. So now just kind of to wrap up, let's say we wanted to share this account QR code with another device. So I've got my phone here pulled up on the side, my other hand, and I will go and sign in, and we'll actually scan this QR code, put in our extremely hard to hack passcode. And there we go, just like that. We're all synced up with both devices. Let's go ahead and just send another transactions just for the kick of it, because it is so much fun. This account really exists, so we can do live request 2. We'll leave off that for now and go ahead and submit this transaction. It has sent and it has arrived on both devices. We're going to say, hey, you know what? I don't really want to. No, that's a nope from me. We're not going to sign that request, and that will reject on that. And if we refresh on the other side, we will notice that it is rejected there. So just like that, you could add, you're going to be, this guy's going to, now he's got his StellarAuth account. As this gets, StellarAuth gets implemented across the globe, we'll be adding more keys, and these transactions will pop up. You'll get push notifications when you've got new transactions to sign, all that good stuff. But that's kind of just a basic overview of the functionality. Now it's time to let your imaginations run wild.